How to Play Cyborg. Hi everyone! This is a special How to Play episode of Fire Breathing Kittens. I'm the Game Master for an upcoming session using the rules for Cyborg. This episode is a summary of what I learned after reading the rulebook. Hopefully this will be a handy guide for how to play for my players, will help me organize myself, and will be useful for you listeners too, who are looking to play your own Cyborg game. I'll organize this How to Play guide into sections. 1. Game category. 2. Combat rules. 3. What happens when you have 0 hit points. 4. Abilities. 5. Apps. 6. Nano powers. 7. Glitches. 8. Building an example character. Game category. Cyborg is a game where you, the players, are pitted against the corp, the cops, and the capitalist system. There are mechanics for your character to implant cybertech, for you to hack tech using apps, to experience glitches online via your retinal comm device that transfer to reality, to use drugs, for your character to become colonized by alien bacteria-riding nanobots, or to become infected with the less helpful infestations of alien crabs, gills, and tubes. The class you play as will impact your abilities and include a shunned nanomancer, a burned hacker, an orphaned gearhead, and more. Cyborg characters have 5 stat abilities: knowledge, agility, presence, strength, and toughness. Ability modifiers are added to your roll on a 20-sided dice, also called a d20, to determine if you meet to beat the difficulty rating to succeed. The difficulty ratings, or DR, range from 6 for a simple test, to 12 for normal difficulty, to 6 for really hard to accomplish tasks, to 18 for hurdles that are almost impossible to overcome. Roll the dice, add your ability modifier, and see if you meet to beat the difficulty rating to hack your way through the world of Cyborg. Let's talk about combat rules in Cyborg. If you've played Pirate Borg or Mork Borg, how to attack and defend will sound familiar. The core combat rules for the Borg games, which are Pirate Borg, Cyborg, Mork Borg, etc., are pretty much the same. Here are the shared combat rules. I'm going to just read the summary of these, and then if it doesn't make sense, don't worry, because then I'm going to do an actual example. Here goes. All the dice rolls in the Borg games are made by the players. That includes turn order, when players attack an enemy, and when players are defending against being attacked. The Game Master doesn't ever have to roll dice. The word initiative means turn order during combat. Players roll a 6-sided dice, also called a d6, for initiative. A 1, a 2, or 3 means the enemies attack first. A 4, a 5, or a 6 means the players attack first. If there are multiple players, they all roll a d6 and add their agility modifiers. Higher rolls can act first. Attacking an enemy goes like this. First, roll a d20. Next, add either your strength ability modifier for melee attacks or presence ability modifier for ranged attacks. If you get a 12 or higher, you hit. Roll your weapon's damage dice, a d4, a d6, etc. And that's how much damage you do, unless the enemy has armor, in which case roll for armor, a d2, a d4, a d6, and subtract the armor from the damage. Cyborg adds the aiming and auto-firing mechanics to Borg combat mechanics. If you spend a round to aim, you can either reduce the difficulty rating by 2 so that you hit on 10s, or you can deal an extra 2 damage. Hits always deal at least 1 damage. If your weapon has auto-fire written as the letter A after its damage dice in the rulebook, that means hitting the first time lets you make a second attack against either the same target or another one nearby, up to a maximum of 3 attacks. Defending when an enemy is trying to hit you goes like this. First, roll a 20-sided dice. Next, add your agility modifier. If the result is 12 or higher, they missed you. If the result is 11 or lower, they hit you. Roll for their damage, a d4, a d6, etc. If you have armor, roll for your armor, a d2, a d4, or a d6, and subtract the armor roll from the incoming damage. Anyone can take cover, which increases the difficulty rating by 2 for light cover and 4 for heavy cover. Rolling a 20 or a 1 on the d20 when attacking or defending are special. A 20 on the to-hit dice is a critical hit. That means when defending, you, the player, can make a free attack. When attacking, you deal double damage and reduce the enemy's armor by a tier. Rolling a d20 to get a critical is great. The opposite of a critical is a fumble, a 1 on the to-hit dice. If you fumble when defending, the player takes double damage and their armor is reduced by a tier. If you fumble when attacking, then roll a d6. On a 1, 2, or 3, you're out of ammo. You also drop your weapon or otherwise make it unusable until you spend an action fixing things. On a 4 or a 5, your weapon breaks. It has to be repaired outside of combat. On a 6, your weapon explodes and hurts you for d6 damage and is beyond repair. Fumbles are rough. After every combat, roll a d8 for each weapon you fired, or a d6 if you used auto-fire. A 1, 2, or 3 means you are out of ammo and have to reload, which costs 10% of a weapon's price. Reloading means it's a good idea to keep some spare change. The last thing you do after combat is heal a bit. Catch your breath, wipe your brow, and recover d4 hit points. You can restore a d6 of hit points also if you eat, drink, and sleep for a full night's rest. Those were the combat rules. Here is an example round of combat. Kay is getting their wanderlust out, going on a Jupiter's travel, riding his motorcycle down the open road, black clouds and skyscrapers rising behind him. He glances back at the city skyline in the far distance and notices much closer a speck behind him eating the distance between them. Kay recognizes a roadrunner following him. That sounds cute, but he isn't Wile E. Coyote, and that isn't a bird. In the world of Cyborg, a roadrunner is a motorcycle-riding, masked wasteland scavenger, rightly feared for their territorial brutality and hyper-tuned, weaponized rides. The roadrunner hoists an assault rifle up to their shoulder. Kay's player rolls a dice for initiative. A 2. The enemy goes first. The roadrunner fires the assault rifle at Kay. The player rolls a d20 and adds agility to defend, getting a 13 overall. Whew, the roadrunner missed him. That's good because assault rifles have auto-fire, and if they hit once, they can attack again. It's now Kay's turn. He turns around and aims his shotgun at the roadrunner. Kay's player rolls a d20 and adds their presence, and Kay pulls the trigger. It's a 15 overall. The shotgun sprays the roadrunner. A shotgun deals a d8 of damage, which, rolling for it, is 6 damage. The roadrunner waster's tux outfit gives them a slight protection from road rash, but at a d2 it isn't very effective against shotguns. Rolling, that's only 1 hit point prevented by the armor. Kay's shotgun still does 5 damage, depleting all hit points from the roadrunner. The Roadrunner's motorcycle swerves, fishtails, and skids to a stop in a soft shrubbery. Combat is over. K checks his shotgun, rolling a d8. A 1, 2, or 3 means he would be out of ammo and have to reload, which costs 10% of a weapon's price. It's a 4. Whew, he still has some ammunition. He wipes his brow and rolls a d4 to recover 1 hit point, which is good. He had been down 1 from an earlier skirmish. Overall, he's feeling great. He has caught his breath and breathes deeply of freedom as his motorcycle roars away, red taillights shining. That combat worked out pretty well for Kay. For the Roadrunner, not so much. What happens when a character has 0 hit points in Cyborg? Having exactly 0 hit points is called being battered. When you're battered, like this Roadrunner is, roll an 8-sided dice and do whatever the battered table says. The Roadrunner is at exactly 0 hit points, so they roll an 8-sided dice, also called a d8. I will walk you through the 8 possible outcomes. On a 1 and a 2, the Roadrunner rolls a d4 dice and is unconscious for that number of rounds. Then they awaken with a d4 of hit points. On a 3 or a 4, the Roadrunner tests their presence. This means the Roadrunner rolls a d20 and adds their presence modifier. If they fail, they fall into a Psy Rage, go berserk, temporarily gain hit points, and attack completely random targets twice a round with their strongest weapon. They don't stop until they're either reduced to 0 hit points, sedated, or dead. So that was a 3 or a 4 on the d8 dice for having exactly 0 hit points. If the Roadrunner rolls a 5 or a 6 on the d8, they're critically injured. Roll on the body table to see what body part is destroyed. Maybe one day the Roadrunner can have it regrown and replaced, but for d4 rounds they are unable to act, after which they gain d4 hit points and can act again. If the Roadrunner rolls a 7 on the 8-sided dice for being battered, they get a hemorrhage, which means if they don't get treated within 2 hours, they die. Lastly, if they roll an 8, they are dead, unless the Roadrunner has money. And then, well, the medical care for the wealthy is pretty good. They have a 50% chance of saving you if you can get to an emergency room and if you can pay for it. Thus ends the example combat for Cyborg. Let's talk about abilities. Abilities in Cyborg represent your character's skills. Your character's numbers for these abilities come from rolling 3d6 and converting the roll result to a modifier score. Mechanically, these modifier scores are what you add to or subtract from your d20 dice rolls. To get your modifiers, consult the table on page 40 to convert your 3d6 roll to the modifier score you'll use. For example, if you roll a 1, 2, 3, or 4, that means, well, that's actually really terrible because you rolled 3d6s and you got a 3 overall, which means that you got 1 on all 3 of your d6s, so that's very bad. And that means that ability has a modifier score of -3, which is the lowest starting modifier score. Any roll you make with that ability, you would roll the dice and get a 9, you would subtract 3 from for a 6 overall. Here's a second example. If you roll a 9, 10, 11, or 12 on the 3d6 dice, that means that ability has a modifier of 0. Whatever you roll on the dice, you add 0 to, and that's your result. One last example. If you roll a 15 or 16, your modifier is +2, and you'll add 2 to every d20 you roll for that ability. There are 5 abilities: toughness, strength, presence, knowledge, and agility. The toughness ability modifier score is added to your roll when you try to survive falling, that's toughness, survive poison, that's toughness, and survive the elements, that's toughness. Strength is the ability modifier added to rolls that involve striking someone, that uses your strength, grappling, That's strength. Lifting and throwing, those are strength. You will add your agility modifier to your roll when sneaking, that's agility. Dodging, that's agility. Or driving, or auto-firing. Your knowledge ability modifier is added to science rolls, knowledge for science. And when you're using technology, that uses your knowledge too, or using an app. Lastly, the presence ability modifier is added to your sniping and shooting rolls, when using Nano, and when charming someone. Here is an example of testing your ability in Cyborg. Gull is trying to sneak. She rolls a 20-sided dice and adds her agility modifier, which is +2. If she gets a 6, she will succeed at a simple test of sneaking, like if the guard was asleep. If she gets a 12, she can succeed at normal difficulty sneaking, like a guard in the next room over that she has to avoid. If she gets a 16, she can do really hard to accomplish sneaking, and with an 18, she can succeed at a stealth operation that would be almost impossible to overcome. Let's talk about apps. Your character can use apps, which are cassettes. Some of you might be too young to know what that is. It's like an old-style tape player, like a cassette tape player. It's 2 spinny wheels and like this like ribbon of black plastic between them. Cassettes have the ability to hack tech and physically affect their surroundings when they're inserted in a cyber deck. Some of the apps a character can use are, for example, knock_knock, knock knock, which opens a nearby locked door. erase, which cuts or copies the last 10 minutes of stored information from any type of recording or surveilling device. Path Mapper, that's an app. It uses nearby sensors and cameras to create a 3D map of the surrounding 100 meters. And Beacon Worm, which places a tracker into any device or cybertech, enabling you to track its movements in real time for the upcoming D4 weeks. So there's this whole list of apps, and you can use any of them that you want. To use an app, first connect to the app, which is called jacking into the deck. When connected, all non-app actions have a +2 difficulty rating. So you would probably only want to be connected to use the app and then unconnect the rest of the time. To test to see if you use the app successfully, it's a DR12 knowledge roll. That means a difficulty 12 knowledge roll. You would roll a d20 dice, add your knowledge modifier, and if you get a 12, you succeed. Or a 13 or 14, that succeeds. 11 would fail, 10 would fail, 9 would fail, like that. If you do successfully use an app, each use adds +1 to the risk of fumbling when using apps until the next day. I interpret that to mean the fumble number increases from 1 to 2. And if you use an app again, the fumble number includes 3, 2, etc. A fumble burns that app for the day, so you can't use that app again for the entire day, and triggers a backlash. Here's an example of using an app. Nur is jacked into the deck and has the app loaded in one of its slots. They want to use app number 4, the false flagger, which fakes an alarm or the location of a triggered alarm. Any response to a real alarm is delayed by 2d6 minutes if this succeeds. To see if this works, Nur's player rolls a d20 and adds their knowledge modifier. That's 9 plus 3 is 12, which meets a normal difficulty rating of 12 to beat it. Success! An alarm blares on the opposite entrance to the building, which keeps the guards occupied for, rolling 2d6 for it, 8 minutes. Write it down somewhere that you successfully used an app. Each use adds +1 to the risk of fumbling when using apps until the next day, which I interpret to mean that not only a 1, but also 2 fumbles if you've used an app once. If you've used apps 2 times, then a 1, 2, and 3 on the dice would all be fumbles. Let's talk about app fumbles. NER is jacked into the deck and has the app loaded in one of its slots. They want to use app number 10, C-Tech Attack. If this succeeds, the nearby corrupt corpos will lose a total of 4d10 hit points. NER's really excited for this. To see if this works, NER's player rolls a d20 and adds their knowledge modifier. That's a 1 on the dice, plus 3 knowledge modifier is 4. Well, it doesn't matter. A 1 fails not only to meet a normal difficulty rating of 12, but even worse, a 1 on the dice is a fumble. A fumble burns the app for the day and triggers a backlash. Let's roll a d20 to see what backlash NER gets. There's a whole page of them and you look at it. Roll to see what you get. That's a 10. NER is ID'd by a hacker collective. They ask for a certain number of credits in 72 hours, or they will post real or fabricated incriminating data of NER and NER's friends for everyone to see. Let's talk about nanopowers. Nanopowers are strange powers that are rumored to be an infection of alien bacteria-riding nanobots. If you are a host for this parasite, you are granted curious powers. These can vary and are listed on page 75. Here are some examples. Cosmic dust bots. They cover an area of up to 20 meters in diameter in dust and darkness for 10 rounds. They taste like stained, rusted metal. Another example is remote control. A target within spitting range, which I assume implies that you spit on the target. A target within spitting range must obey a single command. You will forever hear their wordless voice faintly echo in your mind. Those are some example nanopowers. To see if you succeed, roll a d20, add your presence modifier, and if it's a 12 or higher, you activate the power. A failure hurts you for d2 damage. A fumble triggers the infestation linked to that power. Each nano adds +1 to the risk of fumbling when using nano powers until the next day, which I interpret to mean that not only a 1 but also a 2 fumbles if you've used it once, and if you've used it 2 times, then a 1, a 2, and a 3 on the dice would all be fumbles, same as apps. Glitches are similar to Devil's Luck in Pirate Borg. You begin with D2 glitches, so that's either 1 or 2 of them. Your class might give you a larger dice. After resting, if you used up all your glitches from the previous day, you can roll your dice for more. You can spend a glitch to do one of 5 things. Either deal maximum damage with 1 attack, or re-roll anyone's dice roll, or lower the damage you are receiving by a d6, or neutralize a critical or a fumble, or before rolling, reduce the difficulty rating of one test by 4. That's very similar to Devil's Luck and Pirate Borg, so if you've played Pirate Borg, glitches seem to almost directly translate. The Mork Borg, Pirate Borg, Cyborg games are similar, so if you learn one of these, you have an easier time with the others. Character building. When you build a character in Cyborg, you will either choose or randomly roll for a class, abilities, features, stuff, debt, glitches, and hit points. Don't worry, I'll walk you through them all. I will build a character as an example. So, first, I'll roll for a name on the table on the first page of the book, so I have a word to call this character I'm building. The dice results are first name Clock, last name Foo. Clock Foo. Let's follow the steps on page 38 for character creation. Clock Foo starts with 2d6 times 10 money credits on an anonymous cred stick, which rolling for it is 60. 60 money credits. They start with some cheap clothes and a retinal comm device, which is a headset that augments reality. Every character in this game wears one, and it lets you access the internet. Like everything, it can be hacked. We roll a d8, a d12, and another d12 to give Clock some starting gear. Clock now has mirror shades, a bio ID scanner that can track a person within 50 meters, and a fake ID. Clock's actually pretty cool. Next, I'll roll for a class, which will tell me instructions for gear, abilities, hit points, debt, and glitches. I rolled a 6. That is a Forsaken Gang Goon class. Clock ran with the only gang to have their back and treat them like more than slum trash. They were Clock's family, and Clock bled, stole, and fought for them. They're gone now, but Clock still has to keep their edge. Classes like the Forsaken Gang Goon have a few ability numbers they start with, and then you roll 3d6 for the rest of your abilities. Because they're small, that's a keyword, it says here that Clock, who is small, Clock the Forsaken Gang Goon, starts with 3d6 minus 2 strength. So that is 8 minus 2 is 6. Getting 6 on the roll means a score of minus 2 for strength. Ouch. The Forsaken Gang Goon doesn't list any other impacts to the rest of the ability rolls, so let's roll 3d6 for each of them using the table on page 40. Agility is a 9 across 3d6. That roll translates to a +0 agility score. Knowledge is, I rolled low, a 3, a 1, and a 1, so that 5 roll becomes a -2 knowledge score. Presence is, rolling 3d6 here, 8, so that's a -1 presence ability score. Wow, Clock's stats are below average. We've got one more ability to roll, toughness, so let's roll 3d6 dice here. The result is a 2, a 5, and a 6 for 13 on the roll, which translates to a +1 for Clock's toughness. Wow, that was a bit rough. Clock's not got the best stats. But hey, that's a real example of rolling for a character's abilities in Cyborg. Let's continue with this Goon class. Because of their stealth, all of Clock the Forsaken Gang Goon's presence and agility tests are 2 difficulty ratings easier. Nice. Goons roll a d6 for their weapons, so that's a 1. That's a broken bottle. A broken bottle that deals d3 of damage. Okay. You can calculate a d3 by rolling a d6 and dividing the result in half. Goons also roll a d2 for armor, which is a 2 on the dice for a style guard on the table. The style guard is a tier 1 armor, which reduces incoming damage by a d2, and it looks just like clothes. Nice. Clock starts with debt on page 61, so rolling for it, that's 9,000 credits owed to a small but extremely violent corporation, and they badly want their cash back. Rolling to find out what happened to their gang family, it looks like Clock's friends were hauled off by the cops. When the cops came, they found Clock there too, but thought they were just a punk kid. Loyal to each other, nobody in the gang ratted Clock out, and that's why they're still free. Oh, that's nice. Let's roll for Clock's specialty using a d6 dice. That's a 6, which means Clock's specialty is assaults. Not like salt in your food, like assaults, like punching people. Okay. Clock always liked it old school, both hands raised, running straight at the enemy. Whatever weapon you begin with, start with 1 for each hand. It says, nice, 2 broken bottles. You can use it to make a second attack each round at a difficulty rating of 14. Ah, that's great. Lastly, gang goons have their toughness number of hit points plus a d6 and have d3 glitches. That's, 1 + 1 is 2. 2 hit points. Wow, that's low. And rolling a d3, which is a d6 divided by 2, that's 2 glitches. 2 hit points. Yeah, I can see why the cops were like, no, you're clearly not a gang member. You're just like in this alley at the wrong time. Okay. It's making sense. Yeah. Characters also get features, style, and obsession on pages 54 to 58. Let's roll a d100 for a feature. 49. Using the table on page 55, that's an interesting perfume. I'll do a quick search for perfumes to flesh this out a bit, and it looks like oak is the first strange perfume to come up. Okay, Clock smells like an oak tree. Next, let's roll a d100 for style. 36. That's something called glitch mode. I'm imagining that instead of normal black eye outline makeup, Clock has a line of red on one side of the black and a line of blue on the other side of the black, and it looks a bit like a glitch. That's Clock's style. Rolling a d20 for their wants. Clock wants a 6. Fame. Clock wants to be famous. Rolling a d20 for a quirk, that's a 10. Clock always wears a hat or a hood and shades. Always. Oh, so the mirror shades are back. Rolling for a current obsession on a d100, that's a 70. Clock is obsessed with slacklining, which I actually have to look that up 1 second. Oh, it looks a lot like what I'd call tightrope walking, except the line is sagging instead of straight, and they don't carry a balance pole. Oh, that's an interesting hobby. It's nice that Cyborg comes with all these randomization tables to flesh out your character. I doubt I could have come up with this slackline walking, hood and mirror shade wearing, glitch mode styled, oak tree smelling character on my own, but now that the puzzle pieces are in front of me, I'm already imagining how they go together. Neat. Thus ends character creation and this how to play guide. For players in the upcoming game session of Cyborg that I will be GMing, you can double your starting money credits so you can afford to buy a few things. We're only at 5% maximum power level at this time in the year, so that amount of money won't be able to afford much. Don't advance or level up at all. Simply follow the instructions for how to create a character and then double your starting money credits and spend it on whatever you can afford and want to buy. Hopefully this little rules chat helps my players build their characters and understand how to play. For everyone listening, if you'd like to hear an example adventure, the episode of Fire Breathing Kittens podcast right after this is a demonstration of us playing Cyborg in a one-shot game session. We invite you to listen to it to hear an example of Cyborg in action. We encourage you to find the Cyborg rulebook yourself and play a game with friends.